everybody. My name is Kaylin Leopard, and I'm so excited that you're joining us for the 30 Days of Favor. To start out, I'm going to be reading in Mark 12. And in Mark 12, what we have is we have a group of religious leaders that is asking Jesus, out of all the commandments, which are the most important? And Jesus answers, Mark 12, verse 30, he says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength. Jesus goes on to say that the second most important commandment is this: love your neighbor as yourself. He says there is no commandment greater than these. So that's what I want to talk about with you guys, is just loving your neighbor as yourself. I feel like the Lord's led me to share this, and it's really close to my heart. And I just want to share a personal story about how the Lord's just pointed me back to this verse. When my husband and I first moved into our first apartment that we had together, which was a little over a year ago, I wanted to love everyone in my community. And that was about 350 units. And I quickly became overwhelmed because I felt like I could not love everyone there because there were so many people there. And I feel like I had the mindset of wanting to be a world changer, and I wanted to love everyone and just try to have an impact on everyone. And I became overwhelmed, and I remember even having a conversation with Steven, and I said, look, I kind of just want to quit. I feel defeated. There's no way that we or I can reach everyone here. And I feel like the Lord just told me to look back at this verse. And I was reminded that Scripture told us, and that Jesus said himself, that the second greatest commandment is to love your neighbor as yourself. And so I was encouraged by that. So I was like, you know what? Let me just narrow my focus. The Lord tells me to just love my neighbors. So who are my neighbors? Who are closest to me? And I just wanted to love those well. Well, we met David and Sarah, and I asked them to share if I could share this story. And we met David and Sarah, and they lived within our community. And we got to know them. We formed a friendship with them. We hung out with them. We invited them to church. They started coming. They even started coming to small group. And the next thing I noticed, they started inviting others. And it was actually people from within our community. And then those people started coming to church with us, or with them, and they started attending with us. And then they started coming to small group. And I was just so encouraged. And that was almost like my aha moment, because I realized, if I just love my neighbors well, and I love those closest to me well, like, they're going to want to do the same thing. And then we started to see, like, our community impacted. We started to see people coming to church and to small group, just because, like, we were loving our neighbors, and our neighbors were loving their neighbors were loving their neighbors, and it was just this awesome ripple effect. And the Lord really taught me through that situation. So what I want to encourage you guys is to love your neighbors as yourself. I like to hear practical ways of how I can do things. So after I looked through Scripture, and I saw how Jesus practically loved others when he walked this earth, I looked at that, and then I pulled some practical ways how we could apply that to our lives and do what Jesus did when he walked this earth. So here's just some practical examples, just some ways to encourage you to just live out what Scripture tells us to do. The first one is to spend time with people. Maybe you live on a farm, or you live somewhere where you don't have many people close to you. Well, just think about your coworkers. Think about someone that you will run into contact with daily, and just consider those your neighbors. But just think about, who are your neighbors. You have to know them. So I encourage you to somehow meet them and to know their names and to learn their names. But spend time with people. We can't love others well if we're just sitting at home every night and watching TV, and we aren't spending time with people. Jesus spent time with people. He ate with people. He taught people. He loved on others well, and we see him doing that in Scripture. So we have to do the same thing. And what I've learned, and what someone had to point this out to me, was that I thought loving others meant I had to add in all this extra stuff into my schedule. That also was overwhelming because I was almost like, I can't add in a bunch of other stuff. I can't love others because it just isn't going to fit well into my schedule, but which is so sad and so wrong. But what someone told me that really stood out is that we don't have to add things to our schedule necessarily, but just to invite others in on what God is already doing in our life. For example, I'm going to eat dinner tonight, and we're going to have food on our table. So how about just inviting my neighbors over to have dinner with me? I'm not adding anything extra, but I'm just inviting others in. What about if you're going to the park with your kids and your spouse and your family? What about just inviting your neighbor to join you and their kids to join you? You're already going to the park. Just invite them to join you in that. Next, love others as yourself. Just think about the way that you would want to be treated and love others like that. Maybe make a move-in gift for when you have a new neighbor. Maybe just make your neighbor cookies, or offering to babysit their kids, or house sit for them while they're gone. Just think about how you would want to be treated, and just treat your neighbors like that. Display the fruit of the Spirit. Jesus was obviously perfect, so he did that perfectly. But when we are representing Christ well, and we can only do that when we have a relationship with him, but he will give us the fruit of the Spirit, and we will look like him. And when we do that, we are allowing others to see Jesus and to experience Jesus, and we're going to look different, and it will just give us a great opportunity to maybe share why we're loving others and why we're looking different. But Jesus will speak through us, and we will look different, and we will just portray the fruit of the Spirit so well. And we can't do that within our own strength, but asking Jesus to help us display him well and accurately so people see him and experience him. And lastly, lay down your life for your neighbor. Jesus maybe isn't necessarily calling us to die on the cross for our neighbors like he died on the cross for us. But we may have to lay down ourself at times, and our wants and our desires sometimes, so that we can be available. So I think that is a big way that I want to encourage you, is to be available for your neighbors when they need you, because that speaks volumes, and you're loving them when you can be available for them, available to help them, and to say no to some things that you may want to do tonight, like lay on the couch, or maybe just to clean your house, or just to relax, or whatever maybe your wants and desires, but being available to love someone next to you, or help them out, or just offer a listening ear, or just spending time with them. So just laying down our lives for our neighbors, and just thinking through what that looks like for you. And as you probably know, not many people are doing this. So when you are loving your neighbors well, you're gonna look different, and people are gonna want to know why you're loving them. And you can just share with them that you just love them, and why you love them, and maybe what your motivation is, because we are loved, we want to love others. And if for some reason you struggle with this, because I've been there some days, and you just don't feel like loving your neighbor well, just pray and ask the Lord to soften your heart and to give you love for the people closest to you, and he will do it. He will listen, he will transform your heart, and it is an amazing thing. And can you imagine how many people will be loved and impacted when we are living out the second greatest commandment, one of the greatest commandments, because there is a reason why the Lord has told us to do this. He has told us that it's important, and there's a reason we're going to be obedient because we're listening to him. And so many people are going to experience Jesus. And instead of focusing on changing the world, focus on loving your neighbors well. When each of us are doing this, the world will be changed.